Anthropic just quietly released a 33-page technical specification for something called Claude Skills, and most people are treating it like a minor product update. They're wrong. This document is closer to an architectural blueprint than a feature announcement, and engineers building with LLMs right now should be paying close attention. Think of a Claude skill the way you'd think about a software component or a microservice. You define the interface, you define the expected behavior, and you ship it. From that point forward, Claude executes your workflow consistently across Claude.ai, Claude Code, and the API without you re-explaining the process every single session. That's a fundamentally different relationship with an AI model than most teams currently have. The most important word in understanding Claude skills is infrastructure. The moment you stop thinking about Claude as a conversational assistant and start thinking about it as a runtime that executes defined capability units, your entire architecture changes. You're no longer writing prompts, you're designing interfaces. You're no longer hoping for consistent output, you're engineering for it. That mental shift is where the real productivity gains live. Anyone who has tried to run LLMs in a real production workflow knows the dirty secret. The models are capable enough. The problem is consistency. The same prompt can produce meaningfully different outputs across sessions, and that variance is what keeps interesting demos from becoming reliable production components. If Claude Skills genuinely narrows that gap by encoding not just instructions but process context, it could be the unlock that pushes LLM adoption from experimental to operational at scale. Here's the strategic question worth watching. Right now, the skills format is proprietary to Anthropic's ecosystem. But if the abstraction proves genuinely useful, and early signs suggest it will, there will be enormous pressure to generalize it. We've seen this pattern before with containerization, with REST APIs, with package managers. A good abstraction doesn't stay locked to one vendor for long. The question is whether Anthropic leans into openness or treats skills as a moat. Encoding a workflow into a skill feels like a win right up until the underlying process changes. And in any real business, processes change constantly. Suddenly you have a maintenance surface that behaves more like software than like a document, but most teams haven't built the tooling or the culture to manage it that way. This is the sleeper problem. Organizations that don't treat skill versioning with the same discipline as software versioning will accumulate invisible technical debt fast. The majority of engineering teams using LLMs today are still operating in what you could call the prompt engineering era. Everything lives in a system prompt, or a README that someone occasionally updates, or a Notion doc that's already 6 months out of date. Skills push you towards something far more deliberate, a named, versioned, purposeful unit of capability with defined inputs and expected outputs. The gap between these two approaches is the gap between a prototype and a product. The 33-page Anthropic document is not a blog post dressed up as a white paper. It reads like an actual engineering specification, the kind of document you hand to a new team member alongside a code base. If you're building anything with Claude in a production context, this is required reading. The decisions you make about workflow and coding in the next 6 months will be much harder to undo than they look right now. And this spec gives you the map before you start the journey.